Ah, he brought you in to meet his organs, did he? How lovely. He's been doing that with all his companions lately. He's not meant to, of course, but still, in he brings them. Ha ha, me have no spine, he'll chortle. Then he gets distracted by the baby Yao Guai he's raising. Seriously, do not ask, or he'll start flirting with a light switch. Do you know how many times I've heard him make the joke, "Me good with chat-up lines, me always turn light switches on," and then look at me hopefully until I laugh? It's barely coherent, but he is brainless, and I want to stress that I get to call him that, but it's not really fair when others do it. So, hello, I'm the Courier's brain. Over there is his spine, and over there is his heart. Yes, I know. He doesn't get much use out of you, does he? Etc., etc. Believe me, I've heard all the witty jokes. Yes, the Courier is a moron. No, I have no idea how he manages to function without so many vital organs. Honestly, I wouldn't really question it too much. Sometimes I worry he operates on cartoon logic, and if he ever really noticed you're not meant to live without even a heart, let alone your brain, then he'd simply die on the spot. Yes, I know, synthetic replacements, but really, a Tesla coil in the skull? If you really must know, my suspicion is that while I am a seat of rational thought, intellect, and considered action, the Tesla coil in the Courier's head is essentially receiving all the first impulses, unconscious thoughts, and most baseline urges to drive him on. It would certainly explain why he keeps trying to pet death claws. Before you ask, prior to our arrival here, the Courier was known throughout that pit of radioactive muck you call a home as a brilliant and thoughtful soul. Alas, once we parted ways, he regressed a little. No need to try and fact-check that. Just trust me, okay? The real question is how the Courier managed to persuade me to climb back inside his surprisingly soft and cozy skull. Well, I assume it's soft and cozy. I don't actually have sensory receptors myself. When using the Courier in the manner similar to how you might use power armor, and taking advantage of those marvelous fingers, it seems like it's hard on the outside, but who can say? Whatever, the point is, when I first saw the Courier again, and for the sake of argument I'm not going to pontificate too much on the distinctions between myself and the Courier, okay? When I first saw the Courier again, I asked whether he'd been gallivanting around in radioactive muck again. Rather witty, if I do say so myself. Obviously, he mumbled something about how radioactive muck tastes spicier than regular muck, then asked if I was really his brain. The fact that he'd been told by everyone around him for days on end that his brain had been removed, and he'd been explicitly told I was his brain, meant I was perhaps a little sarcastic at this earth-shattering revelation. So I, with no small degree of waggishness, asked if perhaps he'd like a cookie. I doubt this will ever be an issue you face, so for your awareness, the problem with being witty is that, on occasion, you meet people who are desensitized to your verbal barbs by virtue of possessing the degree of self-awareness more commonly associated with amoebae. Thus did the Courier merely clap his hands and get excited at the prospect of a cookie. And then guess who the bad guy was for denying him that cookie? He asked, with tears running down his face and snot bubbles forming about his nostrils, why I was such a meanie. A fine how do you do? Me, a meanie? As though I am to blame for how he runs about the wastes, arms held straight out behind his back, head ducking a little to make him more aerodynamic, while he makes plain noises the whole while. And he wonders how it is that every raider, super mutant, and Deathclaw are able to detect him from half a mile away. Thanks to him, we've been exposed to every poison, venom, and disease in the entire wasteland. And to top it all off, he goes and gets us shot in the head and buried in a shallow grave. A delightful moment, to be sure. Sometimes I think I should have let him give in to the impulse to simply eat that platinum chip. Naturally, the Courier reacted as the Courier must upon experiencing the slightest hint of backlash. Like a bearded man descending from on high to confront a multi-limbed cyborg, out popped the negotiator, trying to insist that we be friendly to one another.
Empty words. Or so I thought. Obviously, I simply asked what his plan was if I refused to comply.
You strike me as the kind of credulous individual who'd hear a pitch from a mutant calling himself the Master and decide to give that tasty-sounding FEV a try. So when I tell you that he threatened me with unspeakable torture, I don't doubt you'd believe me. However, I assure you, you cannot fathom the level of depravity the Courier threatened. As object permanence is beyond the current Courier, so too is the capacity to comprehend what he threatened me with beyond you. Suffice to say, picture the single worst thing you could possibly do to someone, quintuple it, then force them to read the three-body problem while insisting this is the peak of sci-fi literature. That's perhaps a tenth of what he threatened. I'm not really sure why he suddenly got sidetracked, but he abruptly blurted out, in much the way a 3-year-old might ask a parent where babies come from, if he could talk with his spine and heart too. And I honestly suspect he was debating which other organs he could pull from his body, stick in tanks, and converse with. Maybe it was an absence of maternal love, but from a gleam in his eye, which he'd probably schedule a weekly catch-up with, I could tell he was picturing all the wonderful friends he could make from his body parts. So I shut him down, told him the heart and spine lacked neurons. Not exactly true, but hey, sometimes you've got to tell a lie to get an utter moron back on track. Then he asked an idiot question to the effect of why I could talk without a mouth while steepling his fingers. I think he was trying to assume a thoughtful look, but honestly, it looked like he was holding in a burp. I, remaining a bastion of rationality and calm the whole time, told him I had an inferior frontal gyrus wired directly into a speech-synthesizing processor, and that his heart couldn't be wired up to a thought-synthesizing processor. He stood there for a long, long time. Whenever he's very what passes for thoughtful, he kind of forgets to regulate some of his facial muscles, so obviously his jaw was slack, a little drool leaking out. He's caught a worrying number of flies that way. Not blowflies, you understand. Those require a little more physical effort. But I do suspect he meets no small percentage of his daily protein goals with that open mouth. Eventually, perhaps after he'd caught a sufficient number of insects, or maybe once he'd regulated his body temperature, much like the alligator, he asked another idiot question which I refused to dignify with a proper response. But conversations with the Courier are something of an Ouroboros cycle of moronic queries. You dodge one, only to be hit in the prefrontal cortex with another. And so, he asked how it was I ascended past his readily apparent limitations. I informed him I'd read the classics, real literature. Certainly none of those absurd picture books the Courier crudely puts together. Tales of Sergeant Cuddles, I think he called them. Plus, of course, I gave myself a decent grounding in medicine. The better to cope with a man whose IQ is best expressed using infinitesimals. And in the sciences. Again, how better to fathom a gentleman whose main response to being struck by a Centurion super sledge is to simply get rather annoyed.
But then, bottom lip quivering, the Courier told me I made his head hurt. I simply told him there's nothing I'd want less than to strain his comprehension. Of course, sarcasm strikes the Courier with roughly as much devastation as a pea shooter inflicts on a death claw, so he took my remark as an earnest apology. Then we came to the real matter. The Courier had, apparently, decided I should be reunited with him. I was blunt, stating the prospect held roughly as much appeal for me as the notion of kicking off a new nuclear holocaust. Ever the silver-tongued rogue, the Courier saw his chance to practice his famous persuasion skills and asked about the feel of the wind, petting face, the way food makes nose tasters feel good, or how it felt to adore Sergeant Cuddles. He pointed out all these would be lost to me here in my tank. But it was all overrated, of course, something the Courier only felt because of his hormones oozing throughout his body.
And, if we're being frank with ourselves, no small number of diseases from drinking contaminated water in the hope the unusual color meant it had a different flavor. Obviously, he turned it back on me, pointing out I only felt the way I did by virtue of only oozing when squeezed, which I decided not to explore. Thus were we at an impasse, as the Courier rightly pointed out. I couldn't feel like him, he couldn't think like me. Then I saw that damnable smile, the smile that so often preceded the deaths of giant rats after he lennied them to death. See, I have been reading actual literature. Anyway, he asked the fateful question, now what do? As so many before, the question came upon me with the same uncertainty, doubt, and confusion that marks the Courier's every waking moment. I was forced to ask myself, what do indeed? The Courier naturally seized upon this, highlighting that reintegration between the two of us would create improved synergy. Well, he didn't quite put it so eloquently, but I assume that's the gist of what he was driving at when he spilt crumbs everywhere, then physically mimed anteaters eating ants, and insisted that was just like us. There was, of course, the small hitch that we lacked the tools to, and I quote here, synergisticize, and needed the ones in Dr. Klein's lab to do so. The Courier was a little baffled by this. Well, a little more baffled on top of his default of generally being baffled. But either way, he seemed to think I could simply plug back into him. But then, the Courier is firmly convinced of the baby stalk theory of conception, so his judgment is somewhat questionable. The Courier, blessed with the kind of naivete that saw self-professed anti-war politicians elected to office, shortly before they collectively decided to express their mutual pacifism by tripling down on the First World War's pledge to be the war to end all wars, stated in genuine hurt that the think tank promised to unite us once he'd done what they wanted. I was, I'm not afraid to say, flabbergasted at this. It seemed all too apparent that once I was delivered into their very metaphorical hands, they'd find a way past the radar fence and unleash themselves on the Mojave, not unlike the aforementioned politicians would unleash themselves on certain islands, wherein they engaged in the sorts of behavior they promised their constituents was only found in the ranks of the opposition party. But the Courier's face was determined, or else he was trying to hold in a burp again. Either way, he pointed out that on stopping the think tank, we were, ironically perhaps, of one mind. United in purpose, we set out to put a stop to the think tank's evil machinations and ensure Sergeant Cuddles earned a new badge. Look, the sighs, coughs, throat clearing, etc., are purely for rhetorical effect, while offering me a sip from your trusty Vault 13 canteen is very kind. I assure you, I don't need it.